Happy Independence Day.
Oh, happy 4th.
Yep, the 4th. There's so many metaphysical things we could say about Independence Day. About standing in our truth and claiming our possibilities and declaring ourselves to be independent. Or it's just an opportunity for a bike ride or a barbecue.
Hmm. Yeah, it means a lot of different things to a lot of people.
Right.
And
And
I'm
and for you living close to the shore as you do, it means stay home for 3 days.
well, first of all, I stay home Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays during the summer because everybody just shoops down here. And since I'm here and I can just be here all the time, they got it. Especially with COVID. Like I know, right? I still wear masks and I just see crowds everywhere. So they can have the shore on the weekends. Knock yourself out. Have a
There you
good
go.
time.
That's right. It's your beach. I'll see you Monday or Tuesday,
I'll
depending on
see you
if it's a
Monday or
holiday week.
Tuesday. And you know what? I was really very, very hopeful for the rain because I know that businesses are trying to recover from the last 2 summers. And I just was really, really hopeful that there would be no rain and that, they could get back on their feet again because
Yeah.
that had to be really, really awful for them.
Yeah, there have been some weather events in the last few years that have been unsettling, like that hurricane with the flood,
Hmm.
the Vine Expressway underwater.
Mm.
Guy doing backflips into there. That was like last September, end of August.
And that's a whole nother conversation, but the weather is crazy. I remember, I think it was 2019 because it was soon after. It had to be 2019. Every single weekend, it seemed like it rained here,
Yeah, that's just
and
cruel.
yeah, yeah. And I just thought about all the little kids that were discouraged and parents that were like, "Oh gosh, what do I do now?"
Right.
And the vendors who just weren't making their money.
Yep. Yep. There's that. My brother's been living at a ski area in Vermont for the past couple of winters. I was going to go up and see him this winter, but every time I planned to go up and see him, it would rain.
Mm.
And so am I going to spend 9 hours in the car driving up to Vermont so that I can not go skiing because they closed the mountain because there's no snow?
Yeah, yeah. So
It's like
everything seems to be unpredictable. Do you hear an echo? Maybe I need to turn this mic down a little bit. Do
I
you
do
think?
not hear an echo. Are you hearing an echo through my thing?
I heard one.
Okay.
But it was me talking, so I
All
thought it
right.
was all right.
I'll turn my headphones down a little bit because that will help you.
Okay.
How's that for thoughtful? See if it'll work. There.
I was checking my, you know, all the stuff before you came on. I just thought, you're just getting to be a pro here, right? You could just go in there and make sure everything is sounding good. Really
You're just gonna
good.
be like the pilot on a 747 with your checklist.
Yes, well, I
Uh,
did.
all right, flaps to full,
Yeah.
pressurize the cabin, away we go. So I'm sure the people who are watching the live stream are saying, "Are they ever going to say anything spiritual over here?" And the answer is yes. As you probably know, although I already established in case this is new, this is the live recording session for the Practical Prayer podcast, which Carol and I have been doing for over a year at this point. And we're doing the recording sessions on social media so that you can kind of watch what happens in the frantic preparation that we do before the podcast.
Yeah,
So this is it.
like when you tell me to turn my fan off,
Yep.
right? My only means of air and whatever, it gets really hot in this little studio thing I got here. So last week it was so hot, right? So my husband stuck this little fan in the
There you go.
room and said, use that. So that's not going to affect the sound. Listen to that crackle.
Who
Must
knows?
found an old one. Boy.
I'm not doing quality control on that.
Okay.
Uh,
Well,
and and prior to prior to going live, we sometimes talk about what we're going to talk about. And this week, it was Carol said, Yeah, we're going to talk about treatment, but I'll talk a little bit, and you'll know what to say. So
Well,
that's preparation.
well, that's how it usually is because, look, I use this term, everybody. I am late to the party. Okay. Like Reverend Dr. Bill here, he's been in New Thought for a long, long time. But I'm late to the party compared to him. So I have, since I found New Thought, I've been like diligently studying, pulling on everything that I could possibly do and every spare minute study, then I prayed him up. And it's a story for another time. But anyway, so every time I ask about something, So
Well,
yeah,
if you're late to the party, it's late to the New Thought party because you had
yes.
spent a lot of time doing other stuff. I was in a spiritual desert for 30 years until I found New Thought. And I mean, it's from when I was 12 till I was 33. And I found New Thought. And the difference that I had is that I didn't have anything particularly to unlearn.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not have a competing thing to get rid of. And maybe we'll talk about that during a podcast episode. When they do a blood transfusion to clear up people's blood, they don't drain out all the blood and then put in fresh blood. It would seem like that would be the easy way to do it, but actually it's not really survivable because the blood turns out is important. So what happens is you put in a little fresh, a little more fresh, a little more fresh, and eventually it cleans it out. So that's kind of what you get to do because you can't turn your spirituality off. So you got to do a little bit of a replacement. So we're topping you off every week in the Practical Prayer podcast.
Along with the other little doses that I get, I took your courses and whatever. And you know what I'm saying this to people to say just in a really comfortable way. If you're making the shift, it's not an easy shift to make, but if you want to, you could do it.
You can do it.
You could do it. Yeah. But you have to want it. Just like anything else, you got to want to do it. Have a reason and whatever. And you can call it spirit wooing you in or calling you in or whatever. There's so many ways so much language that you can use. But if you're looking across I call it looking over the fence. I think I know tons of people, tons of people that are looking over the fence. And I'm saying to them, look, I looked over the fence for like a lot of years. Just go ahead and jump, right? It's not like it's not like you're going to another world or another planet. It's just expanding your horizons and your knowledge base. You can look at it like that for a while. Feels better.
We've also discussed how it is not practical to try and keep one foot in the boat of traditional religion while stepping into the boat of New Thought.
Absolutely not.
You got to step from one or the other. All right, it seems like we've got lots of good fodder for a podcast. Let's go ahead and start this when we come back from this intro theme. And Carol says, welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. That's the one that's actually going to be in the podcast.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, and here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony, having
we're going to have a wonderful conversation. You pre-gamed me a little bit.
Yeah.
With one word that you wanted
Treatment.
to tee off with. Treatment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me tell you, first time I heard that.
Okay.
I have a lot of teachers, right? You know that, like my Ascended Masters. I just love them. So one of them is Reverend Ike. And I was listening to some videos from him a few years back, and he used the term spiritual mind treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget the feeling I had when he first used that term. I thought, this is some oaky crap here. Like so now up to this point I had huge respect for him because I kind of understood where he was coming from, right? But I didn't know the philosophy of New Thought or anything. But I trusted him, right? He said that, I thought, this is ridiculous. This sounds like some kind of voodoo. And when
Mm-hmm.
I watched him perform, so to speak, the spiritual mind treatment, I thought, what are you doing anything here? What is this? And I remember being so disappointed because, I kind of had him up here and he did that. And I thought, it must be me misunderstanding this because there's no way, this guy who is so learned in New Thought, uh, if you could get past his brand, which was really kind of cute anyway, but if you could get past his brand, he was a phenomenal teacher. But when he did that, I was like, okay, and so that stuck with me
So
for a
was
long
it was
time.
it the term spiritual mind treatment, or that it seemed like it was supposed to be really fancy and exotic and wasn't?
It was the term spiritual mind treatment, and because I had no frame of reference, I had no way to translate what that probably meant. In my world, spiritual mind treatment really sounded, like I said, hokey and voodoo kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And not that that's bad, but it just didn't, I couldn't get it. And when I watched or listened or tried to put it together when he was doing it, I wasn't getting it at all. I just couldn't see what he was doing. And he didn't do it every time, but just sometimes. And I remember just setting that aside completely. I said, this is the one thing I don't get, and I don't want to because it's turning me off. I didn't understand that it was prayer. You understand that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just spiritual mind treatment. Are you trying to do something to me? And also remember that was a different time in the 60s and 70s where you didn't want people messing with your mind. You're trying to get it straight. To begin with. So, anything that was kind of threatening, that was not welcome. So
uh,
then, fast forward, and here it comes again. And it's called treatment because you use that term Sunday,
yep.
um, treatment. And I thought, I remember how that word was kind of off for me. But I do want to talk about it because I think it probably doesn't get the attention that it should. And maybe a lot of people are confused because it's a very different term.
Oh, it is. Absolutely, it is. And just to close the loop before we go into the next round on this particular spiral, a spiritual mind treatment and a practical prayer for real result are the same thing. What
Hmm.
I did is I took, for exactly the reason that you're talking about, actually that and a couple of other reasons, I relanguaged spiritual mind treatment as practical prayer. Because what we're doing in a practical prayer is to get a different experience of life. That's the same thing that spiritual mind treatment is doing. It seems to me, following these conversations that we've been having for the last year or so, that that's not the purpose of traditional prayer. Traditional prayer is about asking God up there, looking down upon lowly me, if perhaps I can get a favor and have something new come into my life if I deserve it.
Hmm.
And a practical prayer is not that. A practical prayer is identifying that there is only one power, and it's the one that you would otherwise be looking up to, but it's understanding that power is within.
Hmm.
And the person doing the prayer has access to all of that power. There is no permission required. There's no deservability. There's nobody keeping score. There's only consciousness. And whether we can state something new that we are desiring in our lives in a way that's believable to us, and that opens a channel for the newness to come into life in ways that we don't need to understand. So a spiritual mind treatment and a practical prayer are the same thing. A practical prayer and another prayer are way different because the agency is not with an external force that's making a decision about us. It's not judging us. It's all an inside job. So it is always possible for us to create a new experience. Now, treatment, spiritual mind treatment. The main reason that I wanted to relanguage that is because, having been in a bunch of New Thought communities for decades, it would be completely reasonable to overhear two long-timers talking to each other and, have one of them say, well, I was having a big issue, so I went and saw a practitioner to get a spiritual mind treatment, and I manifested a demonstration. And their friend would go, oh, that's wonderful, dear. And a newcomer would say, what the hell are you talking about? What did that mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's an inside joke. It is absolutely an inside joke. And it puts up such a wall for people who are looking for this, because do you really have to come in and be given a secret decoder ring and take a bunch of classes so that you can understand what that person meant was, I was having an issue in my life, so I went and talked to a professional, and they did a practical prayer, and the result is that I'm now having a different experience in my life. Because it's actually saying exactly the same thing, but without lingo, without jargon, without the need to misunderstand.
When you break it down, if you can do that, even with spiritual mind and treatment, it really is quite beautiful, actually. The wording is quite beautiful, but with the work you have to do to get to that understanding, forget it. I remember hearing affirmative prayer, and I thought, okay, so now, and that's before I knew that was the same thing. So I said, affirmative prayer.
It's part of the same thing.
I could do that. I can open myself up to that, because affirmative is really important, especially, depending on backgrounds and all that business, but affirmative, I said, okay, I'll give that a shot. So it's just names and words, but then when you say treatment,
yep.
I'm like, whoa, okay, it sounds medical, right?
Somebody hit the emergency brake. Who is this person, standing on the pulpit, who's now going to do something that should be done by medical professionals?
Yeah, and whoa, you are treating? No. No. I don't.
You still have an allergy to it, and it's been years. It's been decades. Since
because
the Reverend Ike days.
It's trust issues, and I'm not the only one. I'm just seriously open about a lot of things sometimes.
Mm-hmm. All right, there's two things that we're going to do. There are two things we're going to do. And the first one is we're going to talk about the history and why it's called a spiritual mind treatment and what got us to the point where it needed to be relanguaged. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the details. But first, a break.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marchiony's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. We're going to continue the conversation on practical prayer and treatment. You said you were going to define and give the history. I think it's important.
Yeah. So it's Dr. Marchiony here giving a spiritual mind treatment. Now, does that bring to mind sitting on somebody's on a piece of disposable paper in somebody's examining room? We're not going to do that. So what I want to talk about is how the term spiritual mind treatment came to be, because it makes it a little bit understandable, and then you can step past it. And I'm going to actually start all the way back at the beginning with Ralph Waldo Emerson. So he was a Unitarian minister in Boston of some regard, and he decided that the Trinity didn't work for him. He said there were not three forces in the world, there was one, and the Trinity was not going to be it for him, so he couldn't do that. And he had to leave the church, and his resignation, actually I think it was a commencement address at Harvard to the divinity school there is still notorious for the way to kiss off or piss off an entire religion. And what he and his buddies, the Transcendentalists, were into was the notion that there is one. It's a unity. There is one power and presence. There is one life. There is one source. There is one enchilada, and we're all part of that one. And everything happens inside of the one, rather than it being God over there and me over here and an intermediate over there. Then I have to go through the intermediary to get to God. He said, no, it's all one. And he wrote some fabulous essays about that. The Oversoul and Self-Reliance, and there are a bunch of them, which are foundational works, and he basically explained this is the structure of the spiritual universe. This is how we are embodying that spiritual universe and individualizing it. And a lot of people said, wow, that's really cool, he's great, this is awesome. And his handyman, Thoreau, carried on the work and continued doing that stuff. And what Emerson didn't do was say, this is how it works. This is how you actually do the stuff that I'm talking about doing. And he wrote those things in the early 1800s, mid-1800s, this watchmaker, also in New England, I think he was in Maine, by the name of Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. He said, well, let's figure out how to make it work. So he would find people who had various issues and difficulties and problems, and he went about trying to heal them mentally. And so, people would have tuberculosis and they need to be cured of tuberculosis, so he would do this mental thing, and for lack of a better term, they called it a mental treatment. And he started out by working with a mesmerist and a hypnotist because he needed to get people into that state where they're going to be receptive to whatever it happens to be. And he did thousands and thousands of cases over the course of the, I think, 12 years that he was practicing, 7,000 people who he treated. And partway through he realized that first of all, he did not need the mesmerist to put the person under. The person did not need to be in a hypnotic state in order for that to work. So the mesmerist got dismissed from the whole thing. So then it was just Quimby and the client. And then it turns out that the person didn't actually need to be there either, because Quimby could do the work remotely. People would send him letters about, this is the issue that I'm having, this is the result that I'm desiring instead. And he would do the mental work himself and send back a letter saying it's done, and then he'd hear later from them that whatever the issue was had cleared up and they were now healthy and happy and whole. So that's where the notion of treatment came from. It was a mental treatment. And it had a spiritual component to it. And Quimby didn't really identify his process that well. There's some notes that are available, but he was not a writer, he was a healer. And there were some people who watched him and some people who stole his techniques and realized that this is a spiritual process. The bigger idea we have of the divine creative power that's within us, that's accessible to us, the bigger the result that we can have. And so Emma Curtis Hopkins went on teaching that. She had a bunch of students who she was teaching, Ernest Holmes among them. And he's the one who came up with the format for a spiritual mind treatment. These are the steps that you go through. Turn your attention to the infinite, identifying that infinite power and presence is within. So whatever God can do, I can do too. And then knowing that power is mine, this is what I'm claiming. That's the affirmative prayer part of it. But already putting ourselves into that awareness of unity with God. And then speaking that word of truth, inviting that creative power that creates galaxies to create this new thing. And then with gratitude letting that go, because this new thing is on the way. And that is a spiritual mind treatment. Called a treatment because Quimby called it a treatment because it was actually taking a condition and treating the condition. It sounds medical, it sounds clinical, and that was a result of what happened along the way. Because, oh, by the way, all those people who were still praying, doing other things, they were not doing spiritual mind treatments. They were doing prayers of beseechment or supplication to an external God, hoping that maybe they have they've earned enough God points to deserve a prize at the bottom of their Cracker Jack box of life.
Well, Okay, so here comes my line. That was a lot.
That was a
You know,
lot. That was the
that
entire
a
history
lot.
of New Thought in 6 minutes.
And was it 6 minutes?
It was about 6 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so that you can't unwrap all of that, but I got to go back to just one part of it, and so other people you can dial back and listen to whatever piece you want. But affirmative prayer, you said,
hmm
was when I was speaking, you said it's not quite the same, but it is the same. So I think I understand what you're saying, that affirmative prayer is a part of the treatment. It's like the step 3 part of the treatment. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Woohoo.
Woohoo. Now, it's possible to do an affirmative treatment in a traditional prayer, and that's just by being positive. A very powerful sounding traditional prayer, and this is one that I use in classes as an example, is, "Oh God, please don't let them take my house." Now, and if you say, or "Oh Jesus," or "Oh Allah," or "Oh some greater power than me, please don't let them take my house," there is so much wrapped up in that being a bad prayer.
Hmm.
On the one hand, it's a prayer, so you get a point for that. But what you're asking for is for something to not happen, which is them taking my house. Furthermore, it puts all of the power outside of whoever's doing the prayer, because there's a them that has the power, that's trying to take away the house. And when we set ourselves up at the bottom of a power differential like that, then what are we actually asking for? To turn that into an affirmative prayer would be, "Oh God, please let me keep my house," which does not sound nearly as powerful as the "don't let them take my house," because that has drama, that has conflict, that has that has a bad guy in it. But saying something that is positive turns it into an affirmative prayer. And even though there's stuff about having an external God that we're turning to and beseeching and having doubt about whether or not we deserve it, undermines us a lot, that first step of making it be an affirmative prayer is particularly helpful. And that's because from the New Thought perspective, we understand that there is one creative law that is always responding, and it only has one answer. It only says yes. When we open up a clear channel, understanding exactly what it is that we're desiring, the universal creative power says yes. God don't know no. So if I say, "I want to not have poverty," what we're saying is, poverty. And what we get is more poverty. An abundance of poverty, because it's an infinite universe. Take my house. Boom, there goes the house. Keep my house. Okay, we're getting better. Now there's the possibility of keeping my house. There's continue to be all of the questions about whether the person should be in that house, whether they deserve that house. Not deserve it from a spiritual standpoint, but if there's a $3,500 a month mortgage and they make $35,000 a year, there's no way they should be in that house. The best thing that can happen for them is to get rid of the house, get rid of the bills, and then be able to find a place to live that will support their lifestyle. I'm not one to judge. I'm just saying that's the way arithmetic works. So an affirmative prayer is where we get out of trying to not have something negative happen, and we're looking for something positive to happen. And that is a huge first step, especially when we make that be the pattern of our thinking, is to not be negative.
That's a lot.
That's a lot again?
Yeah, it is. That's almost hands down. That's a whole nother show, really, when you talk about saying things in a negative way versus a positive way and what expectations you can have. That's a whole nother piece of it. So the whole thing is just quite huge, and you can't hardly take one piece without the other. This is a journey. I used that term the other day. It's a journey. So you could take it by faith till you figure it out.
Well, yeah, and the advantage, the benefit of this is that we don't have to pray for important stuff. We can pray for trivial stuff and use that to prove that the process works. And then, bolstered by our experience with that, we can start praying for things that we think are bigger.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I was doing that for a long time, and I kept thinking, this stuff works. I need to apply this to something bigger. you know. 'Cause I got the little things are just adding up, and I'm grateful for it. But look, I need some attention over this side of the, table.
Yeah. If I'm going to hit the bullseye every time, let me let me shoot for the bigger prizes.
And then that's another level of not just faith, but yeah, do you have enough does your belief system allow you to ask for the bigger or to go for the bigger, that's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it plays a huge role in whether it happens or not.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can ask for something and really don't believe that it could happen. And you know what? Not even know that you don't believe it
Right.
until you do some work, because that word work again. But yeah, you don't
Yeah.
you don't always know.
Well, you can imagine Spirit responding by saying, "Who are you to think it's bigger?" Who are you to
Yeah.
think that's bigger? I mean, so, people would think, all right, there's getting a date on Saturday night, and there's having remission of a cancer. And so we would think, well, the cancer is bigger. And the infinite creative power that we are using to address this is the one that creates galaxies. Now, I say that a lot, and it's really easy for it to kind of, roll off your, like water off a duck. This is a power that creates galaxies. Does it think that a cancer remission is bigger than the romantic encounter? No. Neither one of them are the size of a galaxy, and it can create that. So anything we're asking for is chump change as far as the universe is concerned. There is no bigger.
But that's another understanding,
Mm-hmm.
that we have to have. And it's just a lot of layers or steps in the understanding, which are just really wonderful. But going along the way, I think it's helpful to keep from getting discouraged. And I'm remembering times of discouragement. This is not all there is. Okay, so if something didn't work for me, I wouldn't say that God didn't want me to have it, right? Because back in the old days, on the other side of the road, it was God says yes, God says no, God says maybe. Well, that's all too confusing to me, because I got to figure out what's, the reason for each one. So when I learned that God says yes, I said, good, this is like one thing I got to figure out. I'm good with this. But if it didn't work, I'd have to figure, well, it didn't work. But that's almost like, reverse engineering, which
Mm-hmm.
is easier actually than going forward. Why didn't this work? It's something in my belief system that said, yeah, I asked for it, but I was like, hey, maybe this will work. Let's see. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure. Okay.
Yep.
Instead of up the ante, let me let it down a little bit so God can, don't give God too much to do. So God can
Yeah.
handle this, right?
Yeah, the maybe or the no comes from our consciousness. If we believe, if we're desiring something and we're believing that it's a maybe thing, then the universe is saying yes to our maybe. And then we get to say, well, God said maybe. Or if we believe that this can't possibly happen because it's never happened before, that would be completely unprecedented, then when we say this is what I want and I don't believe it, then God says, yes, you don't believe it. And it's going to show up not happening in your life just the way you believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really
So-
annoying.
Yeah, I got around it by writing it down. Just write the thing down. If it didn't work, write it down and just look at it. Because if the answer is yes, the problem is not with God. The problem is with me.
Right.
And I was willing, because like I said, I'm late to the party. I don't have 5 years to figure out how I want this to work now. And I got a lot of reasons for that too,
Yeah,
Hey.
and I don't know if I want to break this to you now, but 5 years from now, as you're still doing this stuff and you're still deepening, you're still getting better at it, you'll realize, oh, okay, I did spend 5 years at this, but it was a pretty happy 5 years because it kept on building and building and building.
Don't get me wrong. first of all, I'm going to be here a long time. So
Yeah.
5 years is not that big a deal. However, I don't want to spend 5 years going around and around, around the bush, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's other things to learn.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the hardest. It's a biggie, but it's not the roughest. So like, let's get on with it.
Okay. Have you heard me before talk about the upward spiral?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's what you're doing. I mean, it seems like you're going around in circles, but you're not, because every time you come around into the same neighborhood, you're doing it from a higher perspective, a higher level of consciousness. So even when it's like, oh, this is happening again? Why am I dealing with this again? It's like that's the season for that. It's like, sitting in your house being perfectly happy all summer, and then it gets cold again. It's happening again? Yeah, that's what happens. But this year, maybe we're better prepared. We put in the new windows. We, invested in Polar Tech or whatever it is. And this cold season is not as bad as the last cold season. And every time we go through that, we can be better prepared and more amenable, and it just works better for us.
Yeah. But I'm not fighting that it's not true. That's what I mean. I don't think you ever learn the whole thing. I gave up thinking that, not just with practical prayer, but everything about New Thought in Life, period. Things are going to always unfold. It's always going to be a new learning. I'm open to it. I don't want to fight, right? I'm just saying, okay, let me just step back and try to figure out or understand how this works. But to bring it full circle, though, I can go back, and I did go back to Reverend Ike to hear it again with new ears and new understanding. And I said, that's what you're doing? Yeah. Okay, I got you. I see how this works. And I
That's
even
much
see
simpler
why
than I thought.
Yeah.
All right. Let us take another break, and on the other side, we will do a practical prayer. I have some ideas about what to make it about, but we'll talk about that.
You can put practical prayer to work in your life, and Reverend Bill Marchiony can help. He is offering an online class that teaches you to create your own practical prayer in 5 weekly 1-hour sessions. The final hour brings your practical prayer together, anchored in live original music by a notable New Thought musician. Practical prayer is based on the most effective prayers found in religions and spiritual practices all over the world. Use it to deepen ever more fully into the truth of your spiritual nature. It's the core of a transformational spiritual practice that's simple, even if it's not always easy. Reverend Bill is also available for private spiritual counseling prayer sessions. Together, you'll lean into the challenges you've experienced in life and explore the transformation that's possible through practical prayer. You'll uncover old, hidden beliefs and uproot them to make way for the life of your dreams. Everything you need to know is on the website at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. And you said we were going to do practical
We're going to do a
prayer.
prayer. And I was thinking during the break that the prayer, usually it's like 1 or 2 words describes what the prayer is going to be about. And this time, I would like to do a prayer for a deeper awareness of the creative process and my part in it for each of us. So that's a prayer that we can do to increase and deepen our awareness of how the creative process works and how we're activating it. Because this is a dance that we're doing with the infinite. This is not something that we're sending a note to the infinite and saying, please do something, and it comes back. We get to play our part in it. So does that sound like a good way of of wrapping up this episode, which has been a spaghetti plate of connections?
It sounded really big and deep at first, but when you said a dance, it's a dance we do with the infinite. Yeah, that's very sweet. And
All right.
and it makes it very welcoming.
We will do that. Should I say let us pray like the traditional religions do?
You know what? Yeah, why don't you do that? Because sometimes, you know what? I don't know when you're starting. I told you that before.
Yeah. And
I'm
I didn't
thinking-
realize that that's the reason that people said let us pray.
Yeah, because you got to know when when there's a little not, sermonette or a little talk, right? You got to know when the talk is, and then you can, what I mean? There's got to be a I can only imagine how I look sometimes, right? When because I'm listening, I have reasons also. Like I'm on here and I'm on here for whatever, but the other reason I'm on here is that I learn and I'm listening. And you're introducing the prayer, and I'm like all into it. I even take notes sometime while you're doing that. Then I'll happen to look and you're praying. I'm thinking, oh God,
Oh, you already
I have
started.
been disrespectful because my eyes are not closed. So say something. I know I'm not by myself.
We've
Somebody
talked.
else is with me.
Yeah, okay, fine. We've talked about stealth prayers, though, right? Which is how you
Yeah.
can actually do a practical prayer without using the God language, and have people not realize that it's a prayer. It still works.
Well, that's another broadcast, right?
Okay,
I'm
but
writing that down.
there's an example of one of those in the practical prayer book. But I will not do this as a stealth prayer. I will do this one as a fully semaphore signaled prayer. Therefore, let us pray for a deeper awareness of the creative process and my part in it for each of us who is listening. As we close our eyes or go to a soft focus, as it is safe to do so, and become aware of that infinite creative power, that one divine power and presence, and open ourselves to the awareness of just how powerful that is. In the beginning, there was only that one power, infinite potential, and nothing else existed. And that one, through intention, began sharing itself as its creation. That's either the Big Bang exploding and leading to everything that exists in our manifest universe, that's the evolution story, or it's the Garden of Eden. In the beginning there was darkness and void, and God said, let there be, and there is. And that same unfoldment, there was nothing but God to begin with. That is an infinite creative power. And the creative process is the means whereby the divine goes from pure potential of energy and substance to whatever it is in the manifest universe. That is the creative process. The intention for let there be, and the creative law responding and bringing that be into existence. And consciousness, by its nature, replicates that process. So I know that each one who is listening to this prayer today has that consciousness, has the ability to activate that creative law in the same way that the infinite did, by saying in our own mind, let there be, and inviting that newness in. That is the only creative process. And the creative law always says yes. It always responds to consciousness. It is always responding to consciousness. And sometimes we are able to use it poorly by inviting things into our experience which we don't want. That's fear or doubt or worry. When we are focusing our attention on the things that we don't want, we're activating the creative process and actually inviting those things into our experience. So we turn away from the things that we don't want and choose instead the things that we do. Instead of being lonely, I wish to be in loving relationships. Instead of poverty or struggle, I wish to be in prosperity and abundance. Instead of being in illness or discomfort, I choose to be in health and vitality. Instead of being stuck in work that doesn't appeal to me, I choose to share my creative gifts in a way that brings good into my life and into the world, and that's valued and treasured. We are always free to choose. We are always, each of us, free to choose to let loose the limitations that might have existed in the past and turn our awareness to that infinite creative power and invite it to create something new. And I claim right now a deeper, more profound awareness of that creative process and our part in it for each one who is listening now. Going through that ever upward spiral of perhaps starting with something that we think of as small and inviting that in and seeing it come into our lives and having that reinforce for us that this creative process works, to deepen our awareness of how it works and how to work it. And each one listening is now activating that power, claiming their new truth, and inviting something new into being. I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for the new experiences that are coming about. I'm grateful for that expanded, deeper awareness. I'm grateful for the willingness of each one to turn away from what has been and pivot towards what can be. And I'm grateful to be able to speak this word of intention, of invitation, and release it into that same creative law that has been responding since the beginning of time. And to know without question, doubt, or hesitation that it is already saying yes. This good is already underway now. And so I let it be. I let it go, and I know it's so. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com.
Where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
Podcast is closed. We're still on the live stream. If anybody wants to put a comment in that we can respond to, I'd be happy to do that.
Fabulous conversation. Thank you. Somebody said that.
Oh,
It
that
really
was. Yeah, that was from our network. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was. I thought it was a conversation that no way can you just pack it in just one time. Just one.
In so many ways, we're talking about the same thing from a different angle every week. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's big, and there's a bunch of nuance, which is why we break it up into different pieces. But what happens is you become aware of one piece, it makes the other pieces fit together a little bit better, and continues along that way.
Yeah. Then we come at it from, each of us come with our own orientation to learning and how we experience things. And I'm a teacher, so when I say that's a lot, my head is going like, oh man. It's like he's made 35 different points here. And let's go all the way back to whatever. So what you say in a few minutes, I'll make 10 lessons out of it. So, people say, well, when she finishes with you, you're going to understand it. You're going to get it.
You're going to understand it. Yeah, there's a question from Cynthia, where do we go to find the weekly podcast? And the answer is anywhere you get podcasts. It's on Apple, it's on Google, it's on Stitcher, it's on Spotify. And you can go to BeTheLight.com, b-the-light.com. And there's kind of anchored there. You can also find it on the podcast page at newthoughtphilly.org. So if you can't find it, I'd be surprised. If you go into your podcast thing and you and in the search you put in the word Marchiony, Marchiony, you'll find it. Because there's a lot of people who have the word prayer and practical in their podcast, even when they're not. And sorry, Carol, but if you put in Carol or Lawrence, it doesn't whittle it down enough either. I think it was only in Spotify that it needed my last name in order to find it, but the rest of them, it's pretty easy to find.
Okay.
And yeah, episode 56 dropped last week, and this one will probably be on a few weeks hence. We actually record them ahead of time. Shout out, we're actually going to, we missed recording the podcast on Memorial Day, because contrary to Carol's insistence, she did go to a barbecue at the beach on a holiday weekend. We will miss one on, I think it's the 17th of July, and that's because I will be in Chicago for the first day of the International New Thought Alliance 107th Annual World Congress, which is going to be an awesome, fabulous event. It's going to be on New Thought Media Network as well. The evening sessions are going to be live streamed, and the daytime sessions are going to be interactive on Zoom. You have to register for that. It's newthoughtalliance.org to sign up for that one. But the opening session on Tuesday morning from Chicago is going to have, I think, the leaders of 10 or 11 of the big New Thought organizations all on the same panel talking about what we have in common, where we've been and where we're headed. That is going to be spectacular. That is going to be spectacular.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm on the Congress committee and I'm helping with the technology, and it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be interesting to hear certain perspectives. Some of them I know already.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the speakers I know already, but I'd like to see it all in one place.
I like to see what happens when these speakers who have different opinions get together and agree.
Yeah. We'll see.
That's the fun thing about the INTA. So, yep, we will see. It is time to go have barbecues and stuff, right?
Yeah, it is. I have a date with my husband.
You have a date?
Yes.
Oh, good.
With my husband. Yeah.
Are you going
Shrimp
anywhere?
Tacos.
Shrimp tacos at home? At home?
We got to go get them. It's our favorite thing to do, at least for now, our new favorite thing.
Okay.
So we already set the time and looked forward to it all week, and so that's where we're going.
Shrimp tacos and that's your measure of independence this year.
Yep.
There's only one thing to say to that. Amen.
And so it is. I like that one. So it is.
Go.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com.
Where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.